What's up, everyone? What's up, fam? Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Minicast Monday, the short form podcast we have that brings inspiring messages, quotes, information to get you up and going for the rest of your week. And I really hope it does provide you with that spark, that fire to attack your life and to attack your insecurities, your flaws, so you can start living your best life possible as the best version of yourself that you can be. That is the ultimate goal of these little episodes. This week, we're going to be talking about self-auditing. Now, I'm talking about when you're feeling a certain way, you're feeling down and you don't really understand why, or you're acting out in a certain way and you don't understand why. If you aren't currently seeing a health professional, a counselor, a psychologist or a psychiatrist to deal with this situation, then please pause this episode and stop for a second and ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Be honest, be genuine, be authentic, let those walls down. How am I feeling right now? And what has happened throughout my life to shape the way I'm thinking, the way I'm feeling, or the way I'm acting? This is super powerful, and I know firsthand because I've recently just worked my way through childhood issues, through adolescent issues, and all of those issues I'd carried with me from as young as 4 years old up until recently. I just turned 28. That's mind-boggling. That's fucking 24 years that I'd lived my life without having a self-audit, without asking myself what had happened in my past that was producing this sort of result in the present. Now, obviously, a lot of the stuff that we're going to look back on, it's possibly going to be traumatic. It's going to be struggles that we've either buried or just choose to ignore, but you really have to work your way through them if you want to change the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. So for me, my self-audit come about when I was back in New Zealand. From the get-go, I was butting heads with my father, and every time he spoke, I'd just be thinking, dude, I don't want to hear you speak. Every time you speak, I want to punch myself in the face. And for me, that was heartbreaking, and I just could not understand it because I have this man on a pedestal. He's always been my Superman, he's always been my superhero, he's the most morally sound man I know, and I'd always wanted to model myself after him. Now, I'd never really done so because I've been quite a selfish person up until recently, but just having that resentment and butting heads so often with someone you love so much caused me so much internal conflict that I really had to stop when I got back from New Zealand and say, man, I need to sort this out. I love this dude way too much to continue my life resenting him. And what I realized as I looked back throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years, was that there were a few events that shaped the way I thought, that shaped the way I felt about people and the way I felt about myself ultimately. Now, with my father, I felt I was too soft when playing rugby league. I would always get smashed. I'd never score tries. I was never really talented. And so I projected my embarrassment onto him, and I felt like he was embarrassed of me. So I never felt good enough for him. And I'd carried that with me throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years, all the way up until now. I opened up to him finally, and I told him, man, you made me feel like I wasn't enough. And what I realized while we were talking was that he never actually felt that way. And as he started talking, as he started telling me that maybe it was something I'd manifested myself, concocted myself in my head, I started agreeing, and I started remembering all the positive stuff he used to tell me. He used to tell me he was proud of me no matter how bad I did at anything. He used to tell me that he'd love me whether or not I was a rubbish man running behind the truck. So how could I possibly feel like this man made me feel like I wasn't enough? So having that self-awareness, having that time to self-audit, I really looked back at those events and found that I'd concocted this feeling of not being good enough. I'd brought it into the present moment, and I couldn't understand why I was feeling that way because it wasn't true. Now, that's not going to be the case for most of you. Possibly You know, it's either going to be true or it's not, but for me it wasn't true because I'd make that story up in my head to make myself feel better about being embarrassed. Now, I also had an event where a friend talked about me behind my back, which really crushed my trust for friends and made me not feel good enough for a certain type of friend. And I also had a high school girlfriend break up with me the first time I really expressed myself emotionally in a letter and really poured my heart and soul into this letter. She left me for a friend, one of my best friends, and of course I felt like I wasn't good enough then. I felt like I had to hide who I was as a human. I feel like I really had to deviate away from that feminine energy and really embrace the masculine. So I become a really cold-hearted, selfish person because of that, who just needed to validate his ego by doing things that would only get him what he wanted. I never put anyone above me after that. And now, if I hadn't gone through that resentment with my father, if I hadn't butted heads with him, I never would have had the time or had the thought or the awareness to actually take time and look back throughout my life. Now, obviously you may do this with a counselor or a psychologist, and I would say 100% please do that if you have something that has been hounding you internally and mentally the last couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, even couple of years. Please go down that route. But the first step is you yourself sitting down, taking stock of your life, seeing what's happened throughout it, the events that have happened, and how those events have shaped you as a person, your behavior, your words, your thoughts. Because ultimately your thoughts are going to manifest into words or actions, and those actions are going to determine your experience of life. So I guess what I want to say is, are you going to take the time to look back at those events, those moments of impact, and finally understand how they're impacting your behavior now, so you can start experiencing life as it's meant to be experienced, live life to the fullest, and finally become content, or at least somewhat content, or take the steps towards becoming content? Or are you going to choose to ignore it and continue this pattern of behavior that you don't understand, like it's on some sort of continuum, until you get to the end of life and you actually regret not having worked on yourself, not having worked on those moments of impact, or taken just 5 minutes to stop and ask yourself why the hell this is happening? You literally have the experience of life that you want within reach. All it takes is sitting down and asking yourself those questions. Thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of that little mini-cast Monday. Of course, I have to finish this episode off with a poem, but I'll sign off right now. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you guys so very much, and I hope you enjoy the poem. Ciao. Have you taken time to assess your life and ask why? Why you feel how you do, or why you're acting irrationally? Compassion is needed with others, it's true, but you deserve it also. More so to reverse the patterns you've programmed from the past that are painful than to coerce the view the world has of you. That's distasteful. Grateful will you be when you finally see that your beliefs are clay with which you've continuously played to shape and form your habits. For you'll know that if you water it with questions, relief will be destined, and the life you detested will leave, so what you envision may eventually happen. Now that's the importance of a self-audit. It sounds easy, but trust me, it's not. It'll be uncomfortable, it'll take time, and like a constable you'll have to police your mind. But for true change as humans who are pursuing a life without ruins, that's the best option we've got.